Today's Aztecs update is brought to you by MRC. My name is John Schaefer for GoAztecs.com. I'm joined by the head coach of the San Diego State football team, Brady Hoke. Coach, it is great to be with you. How are you holding up during these uncertain times?
Well, I think we're all doing fine here, and we were sending out a lot of prayers and blessings for people. Hopefully, we're disciplined enough to abide by the recommendations from the CDC and making sure our distancing and also washing your hands and doing everything that we can do to help speed up the cycle of this virus.
Coach, what's the experience like for not just you, but for the coaches on your staff and for the players that are dispersed, I'm sure, around the state and around the country right now as they prepare hopefully to get back here and get underway this fall?
Well, it's a challenging and unique situation in a lot of ways, but our players have been doing their academics through Zoom. We have built a schedule where we can touch base, talk academics, talk some football with them through Zoom meetings, and it's really been helpful. Luckily we have some young coaches who really understand the technology a little better than I do, but it's been neat. It's been cool to see, pop in on a group meeting, see how the guys are doing. Number one, their families, and then them health-wise, and just talking through the things that we would normally be talking through this time of year.
Yeah, like a typical day for you before the pandemic. What does a typical day look like for you right now? Now that we're in a situation that none of us have ever been in, and certainly from a coaching perspective, you've never had to coach like this before, right?
No, there's no question. And the first thing is the time difference is a little different. Usually we're in the office by 6 a.m. and meeting on offense, defense, a kicking game, meeting on the academics, and so now we're meeting as a staff on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and those meetings last 2.5 hours, and trying to really put the time in with our players and talking about each one of them and how their family's doing, how they're doing with their academic responsibilities that they have, and then at the same time, talk to them about, their conditioning, and they have to make that decision, and it's not it's voluntary right now. So from that standpoint, we've got great leadership. Our seniors in the different groups, I think, have done a good job. And then obviously having the opportunity to talk a little X's and O's, and with our situation of only having 6 spring practices, we had 6 weeks of winter conditioning before that, and walkthroughs and some meetings. But you're trying to stay ahead, but at the same time, you almost feel like you're catching up.
Were you able to get some work accomplished in those practices? You mentioned you had about a week's worth of those practices. Typically, you would have had 15. Were you able to get some of the work you hope to accomplish during that period?
Yeah, and for the guys who have been here, who know the players, I think obviously their evaluations change a little bit. I mean, because players change from year to year, but it also has given some players a new beginning, a new life with a new coach. Obviously, me being on the defensive side of the ball, I knew the offensive line really well because of the drills that we consistently did against each other. But, you look at some of the other positions, it's given me a chance to look at some evaluations that we're making. I think the other thing, John, is because the offense, there's some new elements, in those 6 days, we're able to install some of the things, but not nearly like we would if we would have had 15 practices.
If you are able to have a full fall camp, will that be enough time for you and your staff to kind of schematically be where you hope you want to be to start a season in early September on both sides of the ball?
Well, I know defensively we would be ready. And I just say that because the defense hasn't changed. Coach Maddox has come in. He's done a tremendous job. The guys who were here before with Meach and Jordan Thomas and then Kyle all being part of it, they've really done a nice job working together. And then I think Coach Maddox is also has a few wrinkles within the defense that I think will be really helpful for us.
You look at where you were defensively a year ago, Coach. You could argue it was the best defense in America. I think you allowed 12 points per game. When you fast forward and look ahead to 2020, how difficult will it be to emulate a season like last season on defense?
Well, I think, and believe me, we've talked about that, and I put a little pressure on Kirk regarding that. But last year's defense, and with any team, they're never the same. We had great leadership. Kiava was a tremendous leader. Also, an awfully good playmaker for us. You looked at Bar Q and the season that he had. I mean, I don't think any of us would have told you before the season he was going to have 9 interceptions, and obviously those help you when you look at possession and possession time in scoring defense. And we feel good about some positions. I think our safety position with the 4 seniors we have there, counting DJ and there, Dwayne Johnson is the Aztec, and I think up front with Cameron and Banks coming back, and then with Cepho coming over from offense, I think that's a help. Kai Nevis, Connor Mitchell, is a guy who's always been there. I think Tavai, Sam Hines. There's enough guys who have played some that I think we can have a nice rotation.
Yeah, replacing, I know you've been asked this a lot, but replacing Kiava Tizino, I mean, all teams across football have to replace, senior leaders, and Kiava obviously is someone that's going to be difficult to replace. But when you look at replacing him, you're probably thinking about multiple players, not just one guy to fill that role.
Well, right now there's no doubt. I mean, I think, Shawcroft, Alecki, Cade McDonald, I mean, they're interchangeable in there a little bit. But trying to find the best guys. Hemphill has had a good 6 days of spring. He surprised us a little bit. I think Laka is another guy who has some experience and playing time. And now it's getting those younger guys. And that's really your 2s and your 2.5s or 2Bs, whatever you want to call them. Those young guys are missing college football, and how to play college football. And in this scheme, it always is a little tougher because there's enough in there to really confuse an offense to some degree, but that puts more responsibility on everyone understanding what their job is.
When you look at the other side of the ball on offense, what are the schematic keys? Is it additional balance? Is it more explosive plays? Is it getting back to the running game, which has been one of the best running games in the country for the last decade plus since when you first got on the Mesa over 10 years ago? What are some of the keys where you think you can have more success on offense this year?
Well, the one thing is, and it all starts with a quarterback position and really defining who that guy's going to be. Jeff Hecklinski, our quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, he only had 6 days to work with them from a mechanic standpoint. And so, the 4 guys are competing. Carson really stood out a little bit more than anybody else. And You could see it in the BYU game, the game he started for us, that, he has a grasp and a feel for, number one, leadership at that position, and also a grasp and a feel how to play the game. And, from the schematic standpoint, we'll be a little bit more 11, 20, 12 personnel team, not as much 21, but having that ability. The RPO system we'll really do a little bit more with. And off of that, we're still going to be dedicated to run the football. I'm a defensive head coach, similar to Coach Long, and we always play good defense when we're watching the offense. So it will be part of it with that time possession piece.
Coach, if you had a chance to look at this schedule in detail, it is not an easy one, by the way. You got road games, BYU Toledo, a home game against UCLA, Sacramento State, and then of course the Mountain West. How do you look at the schedule overall as you approach the start of the year?
You know what? The only thing we really are going to start next week is looking at Sacramento State and looking at that first football game. We'll look at the first three opponents during the course of the off season, but still, looking at those guys first, because you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So we obviously want to try and be at our best, and the good teams that I've been able and blessed to be around. The improvement from week to week. And so as you look at how you're going to install and what you're going to do, it may be a little condensed and not as much because of some of the missing days that we may have going into it, but we can get caught up as we move through the season.
And Aztec season tickets for 2020 are available right now at goaztecs.com. Coach, really appreciate your time. Be healthy, be well. Look forward to catching up again later this offseason, and thank you as always.
Well, thank you, John, and we're always thinking about the Aztec Nation out there, and we look forward to getting back on the field and having those great fans in the stands. So thank you so much.